Your boarding passes must be fake. 13-year-old Zoe Thompson's stomach dropped. She stared at the crisp paper in her brown hands. 2A printed in black letters that suddenly felt like they might disappear. The airplane smelled like cleaning supplies, and someone's too strong perfume making her feel dizzy. Her little brother Isaiah clutched his matching ticket against his chest. At 11, he knew every airplane model in service, but his aviation books hadn't prepared him for the white woman in the Navy uniform staring down at them like they'd done something wrong. Rebecca Hartwell, senior flight attendant. That's what her name tag said. But she didn't look senior. She looked nervous, like she was trying to solve a math problem she didn't understand. Sweethearts. Rebecca said, her voice all fake nice, like teachers got when they were about to give you detention. Are you sure your daddy got you the right tickets? First class costs a lot of money. Zoe's back straightened. Daddy always told them, stand tall, speak up, and don't let nobody make you feel small. Yes, ma'am. Our father is Marcus Thompson. He used his miles to upgrade us yesterday. She pulled out her folder with all their papers. We got everything here. Rebecca took the folder like it might bite her. Behind her, other passengers were starting to look. An old white lady with glasses was staring hard. A man in an expensive suit stopped talking on his phone to watch. Isaiah, show her your project stuff, Zoe whispered. Isaiah unzipped his backpack real careful. His science fair project about supersonic jets was all organized in plastic sleeves, diagrams he'd drawn himself, calculations in his neat handwriting. He'd won regionals with this stuff. See? Isaiah said, quiet-like. We're presenting tomorrow at the symposium. Dad said we earned these seats by working hard. Rebecca's face changed for just a second, like she felt bad. But then heavy footsteps came up behind them. Problem here, Hartwell. The voice made Zoe's skin prickle. Military voice. Command voice. The kind of voice that expected you to say yes, sir, and do whatever you were told. Derek Mitchell was tall and stiff-looking, with gray hair cut short and eyes that looked right through you. His name tag said, cabin supervisor, and everything about him screamed former military. Rebecca stood up straighter like a soldier. These kids say their first-class seats are real, but the computer's showing problems with their booking. Derek took their papers without even looking at them first. Just grabbed them like he had every right. Zoe felt her cheeks get hot. Derek said loud enough for everyone to hear. Unaccompanied minors in first class. That's unusual. Our paperwork's all right, Zoe said, pulling out her phone. We got everything signed at the gate 20 minutes ago. Derek's gray eyes finally looked at her, and Zoe felt like she was being X-rayed. She'd seen that look before. In stores where security guards followed them around, in restaurants where servers acted like they didn't belong. Thing is, Derek said slow and loud, we've been having problems with fake boarding passes lately. Kids trying to sneak into first class with phony tickets. It's a real security issue. The words hit like a slap. Zoe felt her face burning, but Daddy's voice was in her head. Document everything, baby girl. Stay calm and get proof. If there's questions about our papers, Zoe said, lifting her phone to record, I want to film this so my daddy can see. Rebecca jumped back like the phone was a snake. Honey, phone's gotta be off during boarding. We're still at the gate, Isaiah said, quiet but sure. Federal rules say phones are okay until we start moving. Derek's jaw got tight. Being corrected by a kid who looked like he should be in middle school math class instead of first class clearly bugged him. Smart mouth, Derek said, but not friendly-like. Maybe too smart. He held up their boarding passes to the light, turning them around and around like he was looking for secret codes. It was all for show, making sure everyone watching would think their tickets were fake. You know what Derek announced loud enough for the whole cabin. I need to check these with the gate. Company policy says we gotta do extra verification when unaccompanied minors are in premium seats. What policy? Zoe asked, finger ready to hit record. Can you tell me the exact rule number? Derek blinked. He looked at Rebecca, who suddenly got real interested in adjusting overhead bins that didn't need adjusting. It's standard procedure, Derek said. For everyone's safety and comfort. Whose safety? The voice came from seat 1C. A Asian lady in a doctor coat who'd been reading closed her book and looked right at Derek. I'm Dr. Amanda Chen. These children have valid tickets and proper papers. They've been nothing but polite. What safety problem could they possibly cause? Derek turned red. Ma'am, I need you to not interfere with crew business. And I need you to explain why you're treating children like criminals. Dr. Chen shot back. Now more people were paying attention. The old white lady was whispering to her neighbor. A man with a laptop was typing fast and looking their way. Zoe could feel everyone staring. Her hands were shaking, but she kept the phone steady. Look, Rebecca said, sounding uncomfortable. Why don't we just move you back to economy until we figure this out? There's empty seats back there. No. The word came out harder than Zoe meant it to. We're not moving. These are our seats. Daddy paid for them. We belong here. The whole cabin went quiet. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. Zoe's voice carried something that surprised everyone, including herself. This wasn't about airplane seats anymore. This was about being treated like they mattered. Isaiah reached over and took her hand. We're not moving, he said, soft but clear. This is where we belong. Derek's face went from red to purple. He'd expected them to just do what they were told, maybe even say thank you for letting them sit somewhere else. Fine, Derek said sharp-like. But I'm calling this in. We got to sort this out before we can leave. He stomped toward the front of the plane, pulling out his radio. Rebecca stood there for a second looking lost, then followed him. Dr. Chen caught Zoe's eye and nodded. The man with the laptop had press badges hanging around his neck. James Crawford from the Seattle Tribune. He was still typing, glancing at them every few seconds. You're doing right, Dr. Chen said quiet. Don't let them make you think different. Zoe nodded, but her hands were still shaking. The phone felt heavy. Whatever happened next was going to be big. Bigger than just them. Bigger than this plane. Bigger than anything they'd expected when they woke up that morning. Outside the windows, ground crews were loading bags and fueling up all the normal stuff that happened before takeoff. But inside the cabin, something was building. Something that felt like a thunderstorm coming. Isaiah squeezed her hand. Daddy's gonna be proud we stood up. Zoe hoped he was right. She hoped they were strong enough for whatever was coming next. Through the airplane's ventilation system, she could smell jet fuel and something that might have been fear. In the front galley, Derek's radio was crackling with voices she couldn't quite hear, but the sound made other passengers shift in their seats and check their phones. Something was starting. Something that was going to change everything. In the front galley, Rebecca's hands trembled as she rearranged the first-class service cart for the 4th time. The silverware clinked with each shake, a nervous soundtrack that matched her racing heart. Coffee was brewing, but the smell made her stomach turn instead of helping her focus. 8 months since the divorce. 8 months since David took Emma to Portland, and her whole life fell apart. The studio apartment in Renton, where she counted out Emma's cereal every morning, so the box would last longer. The health insurance that cost more than her old car payment. The phone calls from Emma that came less and less often. Hartwell. Derek's military voice cut through her worry. What's your take on those kids? Rebecca forced herself to look at him. 22 years in the Air Force before aviation, and Derek wore both careers like armor. His uniform never had wrinkles. His posture never slouched. His expectations were simple. Follow the chain of command, maintain standards, don't ask questions that complicated things. I don't know, she said, barely whispering. Their papers look real, but that weird flag came up in the system. I never seen upgrade verification pending before. That was true. In 15 years of flying, she'd never seen that particular code. But she'd also seen plenty of computer glitches, especially with last-minute changes processed through the loyalty program. Computer don't lie, Derek said like it was a law of physics. I've been doing this since before you started Hartwell. Rich parents gaming the system with their kids' stolen credit cards, fake documents. I caught them all. He looked toward first class where Zoe and Isaiah sat quietly, the girl holding her phone ready, the boy organizing his school stuff with the kind of careful precision kids used when they were trying not to cry. Besides, Derek said, dropping his voice, but not enough. Jennifer Walsh made it real clear last month. We got to keep standards up. First class is about exclusivity, premium experience. You start letting just anybody in. He didn't finish, but Rebecca understood. Jennifer Walsh, their regional manager, had been real specific about quality control at the supervisor meeting in Denver. Passenger satisfaction scores, incident reports, crew performance ratings, all tied together with keeping what she called appropriate cabin atmosphere. The message was clear. Problem passengers meant problem crews. Problem crews got stuck working overnight flights to nowhere, watching their paychecks shrink while bills piled up. Rebecca thought about Emma's school registration due next month, about the dentist appointment she'd been putting off, about the college fund that got eaten up in lawyer fees. What you want me to do? She asked, hating the question even as she said it. Derek straightened his already perfect tie. Policy 47B. Unaccompanied minors need extra verification in premium cabins. We escort them to economy while we sort out the booking problem, but their boarding passes show irregular activity that needs verification. Derek cut her off. Look, Rebecca, I ain't asking you to throw kids off the plane. I'm asking you to follow proper procedures that keep all our passengers safe and comfortable. Through the galley opening, Rebecca could see Dr. Chen reading her medical journal, occasionally looking toward the Thompson kids with obvious concern. Smart lady. Doctor type. The kind who didn't fall for corporate double talk. In 3D, James Crawford was typing on his laptop with the focused intensity of someone filing a breaking news story. A journalist. Of all the flights on all the days. And in 2C, Eleanor Whitman was doing what Eleanor Whitman always did, complaining. 70 years old, flew first class twice a month to visit her son in Seattle, treated every flight like a personal insult to her existence. Rebecca had served her dozens of times, listened to her complaints about everything from the wine selection to why people these days didn't understand appropriate behavior. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Eleanor was saying to her seatmate, voice pitched to Carrie. Standards just disappeared. When I was young, people knew where they belonged. Now they let anyone with a credit card buy these seats. Rebecca's stomach clenched. Eleanor's commentary felt different this time. Sharper, more pointed. Children that age traveling alone. Eleanor continued adjusting her pearls like she was on stage. Where are the parents? Probably expecting us to babysit while they're off doing whatever it is those people do. Derek heard it too, because his jaw set with determination. See, Mrs. Whitman's been flying with us for years. Premium passengers like her got expectations. We gonna let her comfort get ruined by questionable bookings? The logic made Rebecca dizzy. Eleanor Whitman's bigotry was somehow more important than two kids' dignity. Years of payments from a racist passenger outweighed basic human decency. But Rebecca also knew Eleanor had Jennifer Walsh's personal email and used it regularly. One nasty complaint from Eleanor could trigger a formal review, possible suspension, definitely problems that would follow Rebecca for years. Her phone buzzed. Text from David Emma's asking when you're visiting again. Told her you're busy with work. Again. The subtext was clear. He was making her look like the parent who didn't prioritize their daughter. The irony cut deep. She was about to sacrifice her principles for a job that barely paid enough to survive. "I'll handle it," Rebecca said, the words tasting like poison. Derek nodded like a commanding officer approving a mission. That's what separates real flight attendants from temporary help. Professional judgment. Rebecca walked back toward the Thompson children, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the cabin noise. The airplane smell, recycled air cleaning chemicals, expensive leather, suddenly felt suffocating. She'd been in customer service long enough to recognize injustice when she saw it. But she'd also been broke long enough to understand what fighting injustice could cost. Zoe looked up as she approached. 13 years old, but carrying herself with confidence Rebecca envied. The kind of certainty about belonging in the world that Rebecca had never felt even as an adult. "Ma'am," Zoe said, polite, but with an edge that meant she wasn't buying the fake smile. "Did you verify our boarding passes?" The question was respectful but sharp, delivered with the kind of diplomatic skill that spoke to good parenting. Marcus Thompson had clearly prepared his kids for dealing with people who might not have their best interests at heart. "Sweethearts." Rebecca began cringing at the condescending word. "There's a system issue with your booking. For everyone's safety, we need to temporarily move you to economy while we figure this out." Isaiah looked up from his aviation magazine, where he'd been taking notes with a mechanical pencil. His face was serious, thoughtful. Way too grown up for 11. "What kind of system issue?" "Our boarding passes got printed 23 minutes ago. The gate agent checked everything and said it was all good." The kid's quiet intelligence was unnerving. Rebecca had expected tears or arguing not logical questions that poked holes in every excuse she was trying to make. "It's just a computer glitch," Rebecca said, the lie sitting heavy in her mouth. "Happens sometimes with last-minute upgrades." "Then fix the computer," Zoe said, phone still ready to record. "Why should we move because your computer's broken?" Dr. Chen looked up from her journal with laser focus. "That's exactly right. I've been flying 20 years, never seen passengers moved because of computer errors. Airlines honor the boarding pass regardless of system problems." Rebecca felt trapped between Derek watching from the galley, Eleanor making increasingly loud comments about standards, James Crawford documenting everything, and these two kids sitting in their assigned seats with heartbreaking dignity, waiting for an explanation she couldn't give without admitting the truth. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said, her voice barely audible. "But this is company policy. Mr. Mitchell will help you get settled in more appropriate seating." "We don't want appropriate," Zoe said, and her words carried through the cabin like a bell ringing. "We want what we paid for." Derek Mitchell appeared with military precision, his 6'2" frame blocking the aisle like a checkpoint guard. The smell of his aftershave, something sharp that reminded Zoe of her school principal's office, mixed with the cabin air as he positioned himself between the kids and any chance of escape. "Time to go, children," Derek announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "Economy's got plenty of good seats. You'll be much more comfortable back there with other passengers your age." The pause before passengers your age hung in the recycled air. Everyone heard the real meaning underneath the careful words. "We don't want to be comfortable," Zoe said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "We want to be where we belong." Her iPhone was still recording, the little red dot blinking as it captured Derek's increasingly red face. Behind her, Isaiah had his tablet out, systematically taking pictures of their boarding passes, documents, even the seat numbers on the armrests. "What you doing there, son?" Derek asked, his tone shifting from commanding to threatening. "Making a record," Zoe answered without looking up from her phone screen, where she was now live streaming to the few followers she had on social media. "Daddy taught us to document everything when people try to violate our rights." The formal language coming from a 13-year-old sent visible shockwaves through the watching passengers. This wasn't typical teenage rebellion. This was systematic preparation for institutional discrimination. James Crawford looked up from his laptop with obvious professional interest. The Seattle Tribune reporter recognized sophisticated crisis management when he saw it. These weren't just upset kids. They were creating evidence with courtroom precision. "I think I'll document this too," James announced, pulling out his phone and hitting record. "For the public record." James Crawford, Seattle Tribune, investigative team. The revelation that a working journalist was filming sent Derek's face from red to deep purple. "Sir, you need to put that device away immediately." "Actually, I don't," James replied with the calm confidence of someone who'd fought First Amendment battles. Public space, public interest, clear evidence of discriminatory treatment. This is exactly what investigative journalism exists to document. Dr. Chen set down her medical journal and activated her phone's camera. Dr. Amanda Chen, Seattle Children's Hospital Pediatric Department. "I'm also recording what appears to be systematic harassment of minors." Tyler Jackson, the college student in economy, who'd been watching everything unfold, held up his phone. Tyler Jackson, University of Washington. "This is going straight to TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. My followers need to see this." More passengers throughout the cabin were pulling out devices, choosing sides in real time. What had started as routine crew authority was transforming into a social media event with multiple cameras capturing every word, every expression, every moment of what increasingly looked like racial profiling caught on video. "Everyone put the phones away," Derek said, his voice rising with panic. "This is a safety issue." "What safety issue?" Dr. Chen asked with surgical precision. "These children have appropriate documentation, excellent behavior, and pose zero threat to anyone. The only safety concern I observe is the psychological damage you're causing through public humiliation." Eleanor Whitman's voice cut through the growing tension like fingernails on a chalkboard. "These children are being disruptive. They're causing problems for everyone." But Robert Kim, a software engineer in row 4C, looked up from his laptop with disgust. "Ma'am, respectfully, the only disruption I've seen is crew members removing paying customers from assigned seats based on what looks like racial profiling. These kids have been nothing but polite." His comment triggered murmurs of agreement throughout the cabin. The narrative that Eleanor and the crew were trying to build, that Zoe and Isaiah were problems needing management, was collapsing under the weight of obvious evidence being captured on multiple devices. Zoe's phone buzzed with notifications she couldn't keep up with. Her live stream had jumped from 5 viewers to 50, then 200, then climbing fast as people shared the link. Comments were flooding in. "This is so wrong, stand strong, kids. Where are their parents?" Her hands were shaking now, but she kept streaming. "Hi, everyone watching," she said to her phone camera voice, steadier than she felt. "My name is Zoe Thompson. My brother Isaiah and I are on Skyline Air Flight 447, and the crew is trying to move us out of our first-class seats, even though we have valid tickets and all the right paperwork." She turned the camera to show Isaiah, who waved nervously. "We're supposed to present our science projects at the National Youth Science Symposium tomorrow, but right now we're being treated like we're criminals for trying to sit in seats our father paid for." Tyler Jackson was live tweeting the scene with rapid-fire updates. "Watching clear discrimination against 2 black kids on at Skyline Air. Valid first-class tickets, but crew claiming fraud with zero evidence. Multiple passengers recording. This is getting ugly. Hashtag flying while black. Airline discrimination." The tweets were being retweeted within seconds, shared and reshared as Tyler's network of college students, activists, and journalists spread the story. Hashtags began forming organically. Skyline shame. 2. Seats, justice. Children deserve dignity. Derek's radio crackled to life, the captain's voice tight with concern. Cabin crew were monitoring significant social media activity related to this flight. What's your status? Rebecca and Derek exchanged alarmed looks. The situation had escaped the aircraft and was spreading across the internet at viral speed, gaining momentum with each share and comment. Captain, we have a booking irregularity with unaccompanied minors. Derek radioed back, his voice strained. Working to resolve per established protocols. Copy. Corporate is monitoring. Resolve it quickly. But even as Derek tried to maintain control, he could see the situation spiraling beyond anyone's ability to manage. Dr. Chen was on her phone, with what sounded like colleagues describing the incident in medical terminology that made the discrimination sound clinical and damaging. James Crawford's fingers never stopped moving across his laptop, providing real-time coverage to his Seattle Tribune readers. And through it all, Zoe and Isaiah Thompson sat in their assigned seats with quiet dignity that was more powerful than any protest. Two children whose only crime was existing in a space where some people believed they didn't belong. Zoe's phone rang, a number she recognized. Elena Vasquez, from her father's office. Zoe, it's Elena. Are you and Isaiah okay? We're okay, Zoe said, though her voice carried the strain of the last hour. But they're trying to move us. They say our boarding passes are suspicious, but they won't say why. Keep recording everything Elena said urgently. Your father just got out of his meeting and he's taking action. Don't let them intimidate you. Help is coming. We won't. Zoe promised, looking at Isaiah, who nodded seriously. Derek had overheard enough to realize this was escalating beyond his pay grade. These weren't just two unaccompanied kids. They were two kids with resources connections and a rapidly growing social media army documenting every moment of their treatment. The captain's voice crackled through again. All crew to stations. We may need to return to gate. Derek looked around the first-class cabin at passengers recording everything. Children who refused to be intimidated, and his own authority dissolving in real time. 5 minutes, he announced, his voice lacking all earlier confidence. We'll have this resolved in 5 minutes. But as he said it, Derek Mitchell was beginning to understand that 5 minutes wouldn't be nearly enough to contain what they'd unleashed. The Thompson children weren't just passengers anymore. They were symbols, and symbols had power that went far beyond airline policies. The plane was still at the gate, but the story was already flying around the world. The march from first class to economy felt like a death march. Derek's polished military shoes clicked against the airplane floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. Behind him, Rebecca's breathing was shallow and quick, the sound of someone on the verge of panic. Zoe and Isaiah walked between them, with their heads up, but Zoe's live stream showed her hands shaking slightly. The viewer count had exploded past 5,000 and was climbing fast. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read. This is 2024, not 1954. Stay strong, babies. Where is their father? This is wrong, Dr. Chen said clearly as they passed her row. Fundamentally morally wrong. Everyone watching this will remember you had a choice. Eleanor Whitman's response carried the sharp satisfaction of someone who'd gotten her way. Finally. Some people need to learn there are standards in civilized society. But this time, her words backfired. A businessman in row 5C muttered, "Jesus Christ, lady," loud enough for everyone to hear. The young mother across the aisle physically turned away from Eleanor with obvious disgust. James Crawford's live coverage was brutal in its precision. The children are being marched through the aircraft like prisoners. The girl is live streaming her own humiliation while trying not to cry. The boy is taking systematic photographs. This is documentation of institutional racism happening in real time. The economy section looked up as the unusual procession approached. These weren't disruptive passengers being relocated. These were two well-dressed, obviously well-educated children being escorted like convicts. The visual made no sense, and passengers immediately understood something terrible was happening. Derek gestured to two middle seats in row 24, wedged between a businessman and a harried mother with twin babies. The contrast with their original first-class accommodations was deliberately humiliating. "Here we go," Derek said with forced cheerfulness that fooled absolutely no one. "Much better back here with folks more your demographic." He'd meant to say age, but the real word slipped out. The accidental honesty sent visible shock through nearby passengers. Maria Santos. A middle school teacher returning from a conference immediately recognized the dynamic she'd seen too many times in school hallways and administrators' offices. Adults using authority to diminish children who didn't fit expectations. "Excuse me," Maria said to Derek, her teacher voice carrying natural authority that made heads turn. "What specific violations of airline policy did these children commit?" Derek's face flushed. "Ma'am, this is operational business. This seems like everyone's business," said Robert Kim, holding up his phone to show social media feeds exploding in real time. #Skyline. Shame is trending nationally. CNN is monitoring the story. This is no longer an operational issue. It's a civil rights incident. Tyler Jackson looked up from his phone, where his TikTok video had reached 200,000 views in 30 minutes. People are losing their minds in the comments. Someone posted the flight manifest data. These kids' seats were legitimately purchased. This is straight-up discrimination. The economy section was galvanizing around the Thompson children, creating a protective community that contrasted sharply with the cold hostility they'd faced in first class. Passengers were offering snacks, phone chargers, even their own upgrade certificates if the kids could use them. Isaiah, who'd been quiet through most of the ordeal, suddenly spoke with the clear voice of someone stating obvious facts. "We're not being moved because we're kids. We're being moved because we're black kids in first class." The 11-year-old's clinical assessment cut through every euphemism and corporate justification. There it was, the truth everyone could see, but only a child was brave enough to say. Zoe's phone rang on speaker. Marcus Thompson's voice filled the economy cabin, slightly delayed, but crystal clear. "Zoe, baby, I can see the live stream. Are you and Isaiah safe?" "We're okay, Daddy," Zoe replied, her voice finally cracking with exhaustion and relief. "They moved us, but we documented everything. We didn't let them make us feel like we don't belong." Marcus's response was controlled, but carried an undertone that made every adult in earshot understand they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. "You both did exactly right. You stood up for yourselves with dignity and courage. I'm proud of you. And sweetheart, yes, Daddy, this ends now." The call ended, but the promise hung in the cabin air like electricity before lightning. Even Derek, with all his military authority and aviation experience, felt a chill at the quiet certainty in Marcus Thompson's voice. Dr. Chen had moved to sit closer to the children, her pediatric training evident, as she monitored their stress responses. "You two have handled this with remarkable strength," she told them quietly. "What you've experienced isn't normal, isn't acceptable, and most importantly, it's not your fault." But then the unexpected happened. The aircraft lurched slightly and began moving, not forward toward takeoff, but backward toward the terminal. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom, professionally calm, but clearly strained. "We're returning to the gate due to operational requirements. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened." Rebecca knew exactly what operational requirements meant. Corporate had intervened. Legal teams were mobilizing. Crisis management protocols were activating. The story had escaped their control and was now beyond anyone's ability to contain. Through the small aircraft windows, passengers could see unusual activity on the tarmac. Media trucks were arriving with satellite dishes extending toward the sky. Airport security was establishing perimeters. Ground crews were positioning equipment with military precision. "Look outside," Tyler announced to his live stream audience. "There are news vans everywhere. This isn't just social media anymore. It's become a national story." Zoe's notifications had become a constant buzz. Her live stream had reached 50,000 viewers. The hashtag 2seatsjustice was trending in 12 countries. Video clips were being shared by celebrities, politicians, civil rights organizations. But the most important change was happening right there in economy class. Maria Santos had quietly organized fellow passengers into a support network. Robert Kim was coordinating with James Crawford to ensure complete documentation. Dr. Chen was providing medical assessment of the psychological trauma being inflicted. "When we get off this plane," Maria told the children, "you're going to see crowds of people. Some will be reporters, some will be lawyers, but most will be people who believe children deserve to be treated with dignity. Your father is coming, but you're not alone." Isaiah looked out the window at the growing crowd of supporters and media. "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby," Maria said gently. "You're not in trouble. You're heroes. You stood up for what was right when adults tried to make you accept what was wrong." The aircraft pulled up to the gate with a mechanical thud. Through the windows, they could see crowds of people, some holding signs supporting the children, others holding cameras, all witnesses to a story that had transformed from routine air travel into a national moment of reckoning. Derek Mitchell stared out at the media circus waiting for him, understanding that his 22-year career in aviation was about to end in the most public way possible. Rebecca Hartwell realized her financial desperation had led to choices that would define the rest of her life, and Zoe and Isaiah Thompson prepared to walk into a world that had been fundamentally changed by their courage, their documentation, and their refusal to accept being treated as less than they were. The jet bridge connected with a solid thump that felt like a judge's gavel falling. The reckoning had arrived. Marcus Thompson sat in the leather chair of Meridian Financial's boardroom, watching Boston's skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, while his world exploded through the iPhone buzzing against the mahogany table. Around him, 12 investment managers discussed quarterly projections, but their voices sounded like they were coming from underwater. He'd grown up in Detroit, where his mama Denise worked 3 jobs just to keep them housed and fed. Now he sat in rooms where the collective wealth could fund small countries, discussing investments that would have seemed like fantasy to the boy wearing secondhand clothes to school. But success meant nothing when your kids were being humiliated on live television. Elena's 4th call in 8 minutes. His chest tightened with the particular dread of knowing something was wrong with Zoe and Isaiah. "I need to take this," he said, standing abruptly. "It's about my children." Catherine Wells nodded. "Of course. Family first." Marcus stepped into the marble hallway, his Italian shoes clicking against floors that still sometimes surprised him. 3 years ago, security wouldn't have let him pass the lobby without extensive background checks. "Elena." "What's happening, Mr. Thompson? You need to see this right now." Elena's voice carried the controlled panic of someone delivering catastrophic news. Zoe's live streaming from Flight 447. They removed the kids from first class despite valid documentation. The crew supervisor is making discriminatory statements. It's already viral. Over 50,000 viewers and climbing. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of institutional racism settling on his shoulders like lead. This was the conversation he'd never wanted to have, when his children's innocence collided with America's casual cruelty. How bad is the footage devastating? The crew supervisor, Derek Mitchell, has them on camera accusing your kids of fraud with zero evidence. A passenger named Eleanor Whitman is making overtly racist comments. Multiple angles professional journalist recording. But Marcus, your kids are handling it like champions. Zoe's live streaming with composure most adults couldn't manage. Marcus leaned against the window overlooking Boston's financial district. 20 years of building Thompson Tech, becoming someone who couldn't be ignored or dismissed. And still, his children faced the same discrimination he'd experienced decades earlier. "What's our leverage with Skyline Comprehensive?" Elena replied. "We provide their booking systems, customer analytics, loyalty programs, operational algorithms. If we pull support, they're operating with 1990s technology while competitors use modern systems." But Marcus, what? There's more. "I've been analyzing their systems since the incident started. The irregularity that flagged the kids wasn't a glitch. Someone manually triggered it 30 minutes after their upgrade processed. Someone was specifically monitoring demographic-based upgrades." Marcus felt his controlled fury crystallizing into something colder and more focused. Not random discrimination. Targeted harassment of his family using algorithmic profiling his own company should have prevented. "Elena, I'm going to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Always. Am I about to make this worse for my kids by going nuclear on Skyline Air? Am I putting them through more trauma because my pride is hurt?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, I've watched that live stream footage 12 times. Your children are being subjected to systematic humiliation because adults decided they don't belong in first class. This isn't about your pride. This is about whether two kids get to grow up believing their dignity matters." Marcus thought about Zoe's science project, her water purification system that could help communities worldwide. Isaiah's aerospace research that NASA was already monitoring. Brilliant kids who should be excited about tomorrow's symposium, not defending their right to exist in seats their father had purchased. What's Thomas Mackenzie's position? Tommy was on Skyline's board, his MIT roommate and oldest friend. He's been advocating for complete compliance with whatever demands you make. Says the board understands this is existential for the company. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call, the number he dreaded seeing. His children needing their father while he sat in a boardroom 3,000 miles away. "Elena, coordinate with legal. Pull every contract we have with Skyline and get me Patricia Brennan's direct line. I'm going to give her exactly one chance to fix this before I destroy her company." He answered Zoe's call, putting it on speaker as he watched his daughter's face fill the screen. 13 years old, sitting in economy class with dignity that broke his heart, live streaming her own discrimination to strangers who cared more about her welfare than the airline crew. "Daddy, I can see you," Zoe said, her voice steady despite everything. "We did what you taught us. We documented everything. We didn't let them make us small. I know, baby girl. You and Isaiah handled this perfectly. You stood up for yourselves with more courage than most adults show in their entire lives." But as he spoke, Marcus felt the weight of a terrible choice. He could accept this humiliation, let corporate lawyers handle it quietly, protect his children from further exposure. Or he could use this moment to force systematic change that might prevent other kids from experiencing what Zoe and Isaiah had endured. Daddy Isaiah's voice smaller and more uncertain. "Yes, son. Are the bad people going to get in trouble?" Marcus stared at his reflection in the boardroom window. The successful businessman who'd learned to navigate white corporate spaces, who'd built a company specifically designed to prevent algorithmic discrimination. His own children had become victims of the same biases his software existed to detect and prevent. "The people who made bad choices are going to face consequences," he said carefully. "But more importantly, we're going to make sure their bad choices can't hurt other children." After ending the call, Marcus stood alone in the marble hallway, understanding that the next few hours would define not just his response to this crisis, but his children's understanding of how justice works in America. He could choose the safe path: settlements, confidentiality agreements, quiet resolution that protected his family's privacy. Or he could choose the harder path: public confrontation that might traumatize his children further, but could force industry-wide accountability. His phone rang. Patricia Brennan, CEO of Skyline Air. Marcus: "I'm calling to personally apologize." "Patricia, stop." Marcus interrupted. "I don't want apologies. I want to understand whether your company is committed to systematic change or just damage control. We're prepared to take immediate action against the crew members involved. Individual accountability is the starting point, not the solution. Your company used technology I designed to perpetuate the very discrimination it was supposed to prevent. This isn't about rogue employees. This is about institutional failure." Silence on the line. Then Patricia's voice, smaller and more strained. "What do you need?" "I need to believe that no other parent will watch their children be humiliated the way mine were today. I need systematic changes with federal oversight and independent monitoring. I need this to mean something." Marcus: "That level of change is the minimum required to prevent me from withdrawing all technology support and releasing 3 years of discrimination data to federal prosecutors." Patricia: "Your company has 30 minutes to decide whether it wants to lead industry reform or become an example of what happens to companies that discriminate against children." He ended the call and immediately dialed Elena. Status update on congressional response: 4 senators calling for federal investigations. Transportation Secretary requesting briefings. Civil rights organizations mobilizing. Marcus: "This has gone beyond corporate crisis into national policy discussion." Marcus walked back toward the Meridian Financial boardroom, where Boston's investment elite waited. He thought about his mother working 3 jobs, about being followed in stores, about every algorithm he'd built to detect the biases his own children had just experienced. "Elena, book me on the next flight to Seattle and prepare comprehensive presentations showing exactly how Skyline's discrimination was systematic, algorithmic, and preventable. If they want to fight, they'll learn what accountability costs when you target someone's children." As he opened the boardroom door, Marcus Thompson understood that the next 24 hours would either establish new standards for airline industry accountability or create the most expensive corporate discrimination settlement in American history. His children had stood up for themselves with remarkable courage. Now their father was going to show them what happened when someone with real power decided enough was enough. But first, he had to wrestle with the question that would haunt him regardless of outcome. Was he fighting for justice or revenge? And did it matter if the result was systematic change that protected other families? The war was just beginning, but Marcus had been preparing for this battle his entire life. The emergency boardroom at Skyline Air's Denver headquarters felt like mission control during a shuttle disaster. Patricia Brennan stood at the head of the obsidian table while wall-mounted displays showed real-time destruction of everything she'd worked 3 years to build. Stock price down 43% and accelerating. Social media, 8.2 million negative impressions. Congressional response, 6 senators demanding investigations. Corporate clients, Goldman Sachs, contract suspended. "We've lost over $1 billion in market cap in 6 hours. CFO Michael Chen announced, his voice hollow. Microsoft terminated their corporate travel agreement. Boeing is reviewing our relationship. This isn't just consumer backlash, it's institutional rejection." Patricia had spent 3 years transforming Skyline Air from a budget carrier known for discrimination into a premium airline, emphasizing inclusive service. The irony was crushing. This crisis threatened to erase every reform she'd implemented. "Show me the newest footage," she said, though each viewing was like pressing on a broken bone. COO Vincent Rodriguez activated the main display. James Crawford's journalistic footage was devastating. Derek Mitchell's authoritative dismissal of valid documentation. Rebecca Hartwell's condescending tone. Eleanor Whitman's racist commentary. And through it all, 2 children maintaining dignity while being publicly humiliated. "It gets worse with every angle," muttered Head of Operations Sarah Kim. "We have Dr. Chen's medical assessment of psychological trauma. Tyler Jackson's TikTok, with 3 million views, and the children's own live stream reaching international audiences. This isn't spinnable." But the person Patricia really needed to hear from sat at the far end of the table with his arms crossed and his expression grim. Board Chairman William Sterling, old-school airline executive who'd built his reputation on operational efficiency and cost control. Patricia Sterling said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd fired multiple CEOs. "I've been in this industry 40 years. I've seen discrimination lawsuits, federal investigations, congressional hearings. But I've never seen anything like this." General Counsel David Park pulled up legal analysis on his tablet. Federal civil rights violations, breach of contract, child endangerment through psychological abuse. Justice Department Civil Rights Division is gathering information. "We're looking at potential criminal liability for systematic discrimination." Criminal charges. Board member Rebecca Walsh laughed nervously. "For crew members following established procedures." "What procedures?" Vincent demanded, pulling up employee manuals. "I've reviewed every protocol. There's no regulation authorizing removal of passengers with valid documentation based on system irregularities." Derek Mitchell improvised discriminatory policies in real time. Sterling leaned forward. "That's the problem, Patricia. If this was individual misconduct, we could contain it. But the evidence suggests institutional patterns. The Thompson family's legal team has been analyzing our systems for hours. They claim systematic bias embedded in our operational software. Marketing Director Lisa Wang was monitoring social media feeds with the focused horror of someone watching a wildfire consume everything she'd built. Skyline Shame has 84 million impressions globally. # 2 seats. Justice is trending in 47 countries. But Patricia, it's not just anger, it's organization. Civil rights groups are mobilizing protests at 12 airports. Patricia's phone buzzed with another urgent message from Marcus Thompson's assistant. "Mr. Thompson requests immediate meeting. 30-minute deadline for response before implementing consequences." "He's demanding face-to-face negotiation," Patricia announced. Marcus Thompson wants binding commitments to systematic reform. Sterling's expression hardened. "Patricia, let me be clear. This board will not submit to extortion from aggrieved customers regardless of their resources or connections. We handle this through proper legal channels." Bill interrupted Thomas McKenzie, the board member, who'd been notably quiet until now. "Marcus Thompson isn't just an aggrieved customer. He's our primary technology vendor. Thompson Tech provides 70% of our operational infrastructure, so we diversify our technology relationships." Sterling replied dismissively. "No single vendor should have that much leverage over our operations." Tommy McKenzie stood up, his MIT class ring catching the conference room lights as he placed both hands on the table. "Bill, with respect, you don't understand what we're facing. Thompson Tech isn't just another vendor. They're integrated into everything. Booking systems, loyalty programs, customer analytics, operational efficiency, algorithms. If Marcus withdraws support, we're operating with 1990s technology, while competitors use modern systems." "How long to replace their systems?" Sterling asked. CTO Amanda Foster consulted her tablet with the expression of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. 12 to 18 months minimum. "But Bill, that assumes we can find vendors willing to work with us after viral footage of us discriminating against children." The technology industry is heavily influenced by civil rights advocacy. The room absorbed this in uncomfortable silence. Replacing Thomson Tech's systems would be expensive, time-consuming, and potentially impossible, given the reputational damage from discriminating against the founder's children. "There's more," David Park announced grimly. "I've been reviewing our relationship with Thomson Tech, and we've been using their bias detection software for 3 years. The irony is devastating. We purchased technology specifically designed to prevent algorithmic discrimination, then failed to implement it properly." Sterling's face reddened. "Are you telling me we had tools to prevent this incident and chose not to use them?" "We implemented approximately 30% of Thomson Tech's recommended bias detection protocols," Amanda Foster admitted. "Full implementation was deemed too expensive and operationally complex." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Skyline Air had purchased anti-discrimination technology, then deliberately chosen partial implementation that allowed profitable bias to continue while appearing compliant with civil rights requirements. "Jesus Christ," muttered board member Rebecca Walsh. "We're not just facing discrimination charges. We're facing willful negligence charges." Patricia's assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Ms. Brennan, Marcus Thompson is on line 1. He says this is your final opportunity for direct negotiation." Sterling stood up with the rigid authority of someone unaccustomed to being challenged. "Put him through. I'll handle this." "Bill, no," Tommy McKenzie said urgently. "Marcus is my oldest friend. I know how he operates when his family is threatened. Traditional corporate negotiation strategies won't work. Tommy, I appreciate your relationship, but this board doesn't negotiate with extortionists," Sterling replied, reaching for the conference phone. The voice that filled the room was calm, professional, and utterly implacable. Marcus Thompson sounded like someone who held all leverage and intended to use every bit of it. "Mr. Sterling, I assume you've reviewed the evidence of your company's systematic discrimination against my children." "Mr. Thompson, we're prepared to offer substantial compensation for any inconvenience." "I don't want compensation. I want systematic reform with federal oversight and independent monitoring. Your company used technology I created to perpetuate the very discrimination it was designed to prevent." Sterling's jaw tightened. "Mr. Thompson, while we regret the incident, Skyline Air doesn't submit to ultimatums from individual customers." "Then you've made your choice," Marcus replied with Arctic calm. "Thomson Tech is immediately terminating all support contracts with Skyline Air. Your booking systems will begin failing within hours. Your customer analytics will disappear. Your operational algorithms will go dark. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors will receive comprehensive documentation of 3 years of systematic discrimination that my team has compiled." Sterling's face went white. "You can't terminate contracts without proper notice periods." "Mr. Sterling, discriminating against my children violated every moral and legal clause in our agreements. You forfeited the right to contract protection when your employees publicly humiliated children on camera." Tommy McKenzie grabbed the phone. "Marcus, it's Tommy. Can we discuss this privately?" "Tommy, there's nothing private about discriminating against children on social media. Your board chose confrontation over accountability. Now they'll learn what confrontation costs." The line went dead. The conference room fell silent, except for the hum of air conditioning and Sterling's heavy breathing as he processed what had just happened. Patricia looked around the table at her board members, seeing the dawning recognition that their company had just declared war on someone who held the power to destroy them. "How quickly will the system failures begin?" Sterling asked Amanda Foster. "Booking platform crashes within 4 to 6 hours. Customer service systems fail within 12 hours. Operational coordination becomes impossible within 24 hours. We'll be grounded within 48 hours. Sterling sat down heavily. For the first time in 40 years of airline leadership, he looked genuinely frightened. Patricia said quietly, "Can you reach Marcus privately?" "He won't take my calls now," Tommy replied. "Marcus doesn't bluff, and he doesn't forgive institutional attacks on his family. We had one chance to handle this with dignity, and Bill chose corporate machismo instead." Sterling's phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. He read it and went even paler. "The Wall Street Journal is running a story about Thompson Tech terminating our contracts. Stock futures are suspended. Trading won't resume until we provide stability guidance to investors." Patricia understood that in the span of one phone call, her company had moved from crisis management to survival mode. They were no longer fighting to preserve their reputation. They were fighting to exist. "Options," she asked the room. "Capitulate completely," David Park said bluntly. "Accept whatever terms Marcus Thompson demands. Submit to federal oversight. Implement comprehensive reforms. Hope that transformation prevents total corporate destruction. Or fight." Sterling said grimly, "Find replacement technology vendors. Weather the storm. Refuse to let one family destroy a company that employs 28,000 people." Tommy Mackenzie looked at Sterling with something between pity and disgust. "Bill, you still don't understand. We didn't discriminate against one family. We discriminated against the family of someone who has the power to hold us accountable for systematic racism we've been perpetuating for years. The reckoning was always coming. We just chose the worst possible messenger." Patricia Brennan understood that the next decision would determine whether Skyline Air survived the next week, much less recovered its reputation. They could choose transformation or destruction, accountability or denial. But the choice had to be made in the next 6 hours before their operational systems failed completely and made the decision irrelevant. The clock was ticking, and Marcus Thompson wasn't bluffing. Elena Vasquez's command center at Thompson Tech looked like NASA mission control during a space crisis. 37 monitors displayed cascading data streams, while 12 analysts worked with surgical precision to dissect 3 years of systematic discrimination hidden inside airline software. Marcus wants everything Elena had told her team 4 hours earlier. Every discriminatory algorithm, every biased performance metric, every line of code that enabled what happened to those kids. What they found was worse than discrimination. It was a sophisticated system of technological racism designed to appear objective while perpetuating bias with mathematical precision. Alex Chen Thompson, Tech's lead algorithm analyst, looked up from code that glowed like radioactive evidence on his screen. "Elena, this is criminal. They didn't just discriminate. They built software specifically designed to discriminate while maintaining plausible deniability." Elena rolled her chair to Alex's workstation, where lines of discriminatory logic scrolled past like DNA from a diseased organism. The Skyline air booking algorithm contained variables that violated every principle of ethical software design. Postal code, risk matrices name, ethnicity, probability, calculations, upgrade approval, hierarchies that directly correlated with racial demographics. "Show me the passenger profiling module," Elena demanded. Alex highlighted code sections that made Elena's stomach clench with professional disgust. The system flagged irregular bookings based on algorithmic prejudice. Zip codes from predominantly black neighborhoods triggered enhanced verification protocols, names identified through linguistic analysis as ethnically non-traditional, required human oversight, and payment methods associated with minority banking institutions faced fraud prevention screening. "This isn't unconscious bias," Elena said quietly, her voice tight with controlled fury. "This is deliberate construction of digital redlining disguised as security protocol." Sarah Kim, the team's compliance specialist, discovered even worse evidence in employee performance databases. "Elena, The crew incentive structure is designed to financially reward discrimination. Look at this. Elena moved to Sarah's monitors, where employee evaluation data painted a devastating picture of institutional racism made profitable. Crew members received performance bonuses based on passenger satisfaction metrics and incident management efficiency. The metrics included cabin atmosphere maintenance and disruptive passenger mitigation, corporate euphemisms that financially incentivized removing passengers who didn't fit demographic expectations. Derek Mitchell earned $6,000 in bonuses last year for excellence in premium cabin management. Sarah continued, her voice hollow. His performance reviews specifically praise his ability to handle non-traditional passenger challenges with discretion and authority. Elena felt physically sick. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. Skyline Air had created direct financial incentives for discriminating against minority passengers, then provided algorithmic cover that made bigotry look like data-driven operational efficiency. Dr. Michael Rodriguez Thompson, Tech's ethics officer, looked up from his legal analysis with the expression of someone documenting war crimes. Elena, what we're seeing constitutes systematic violation of federal civil rights statutes, Fair Housing Act violations through zip code profiling, Equal Credit Opportunity Act violations through payment method discrimination, Civil Rights Act violations through algorithmic racial targeting. How extensive? Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. 3 years of passenger data show clear discriminatory patterns, Rodriguez replied. Black passengers, 340% more likely to be flagged for irregular bookings. Latino passengers subjected to enhanced documentation requirements at 285%, the rate of white passengers. Asian passengers receive identity verification challenges at 195% higher frequency. Elena's secure phone rang with Marcus's priority line. Status report. I need ammunition that makes denial impossible. Elena activated voice recording while continuing to coordinate her team's digital excavation. Marcus, the discrimination against Zoe and Isaiah wasn't incidental. It was the predictable result of systematic algorithmic bias embedded throughout Skyline's operational software. She pulled up Alex's findings on her primary monitor. The booking algorithm includes variables specifically designed to target minority passengers. Zip code analysis flags neighborhoods with high minority populations as elevated risk zones. Name analysis uses linguistic probability matrices to identify ethnically diverse passengers for additional scrutiny. Payment analysis subjects certain banking relationships to enhanced fraud screening. Marcus's response was cold and controlled. How much of this could our bias detection software have prevented? All of it, Elena replied grimly. Every single discriminatory action would have been flagged, documented, and prevented if Skyline had implemented the full Thompson Tech bias detection suite. Instead, they purchased 30% of our recommended protocols, enough to appear compliant while maintaining profitable discrimination. Elena could hear airport sounds in the background of Marcus's call. He was already flying to Seattle, preparing for direct confrontation with corporate executives who had no idea how much evidence his team had compiled against them. Elena, I need presentation materials that make corporate denial impossible. Visual documentation that even lawyers can't spin or deflect. Already in progress, Elena confirmed, then addressed her team with the focused intensity of people building a legal case. Priority 1. Comprehensive discrimination analysis with clear visual presentations. Priority 2. Documentation showing how our bias detection software would have prevented every incident if properly implemented. Priority 3. Financial analysis, quantifying how much systematic discrimination has cost minority passengers. 20 minutes later, Dr. Rodriguez made a discovery that made the entire team fall silent. Elena, I found the smoking gun. Source code comments written by Skyline's programmers. On the main display, code comments appeared that served as digital confessions. Upgrade verification module V4. 2. Enhanced screening for demographic outliers. Coordinate with crew. Performance incentives. Flag. Minority. Dense postal codes for human review. Require additional verification for non-European names. Prioritize premium passenger complaints over operational equity. Maintain plausible deniability through system randomization. Elena stared at the screen, reading programmer confessions that documented deliberate construction of racist algorithms with built-in legal protection. This wasn't unconscious bias or systemic accident. This was intentional discrimination, hidden behind mathematical complexity. Screenshot everything Elena ordered. Marcus needs ironclad proof that this was deliberate, systematic, and ongoing. Sarah Kim had been analyzing the financial impact of discriminatory policies. Elena, conservative estimates show Skyline Air has collected over $23 million through discriminatory practices over 3 years. Extra fees, seat assignment charges, booking complications, upgrade denials, all disproportionately targeting minority passengers while providing inferior service. Alex Chen discovered the manual override system that had specifically targeted Zoe and Isaiah Thompson. Elena, the flag that triggered their discrimination, was manually activated by Jennifer Walsh 37 minutes after their upgrade was processed. She has administrative access to monitor demographic-based upgrades and can manually subject them to enhanced verification. So she was actively monitoring for Black families upgrading to first class and flagging them for crew harassment. Elena said, her voice flat with disgust. Exactly. The system logs show she's manually flagged 47 minority family upgrades over the past 18 months. Every single flag resulted in passenger confrontation or seat reassignment. Elena's phone buzzed with another call from Marcus. Elena, how bulletproof is the evidence? Legally impenetrable. We have discriminatory code with programmer confessions. Financial incentives that reward bias. Manual targeting of minority passengers. 3 years of passenger data showing systematic racial disparities. And most damaging, documentation that our bias detection software would have prevented everything if properly implemented. Timeline for federal prosecutors. I can have a complete evidence package ready within 2 hours. Criminal conspiracy charges, civil rights violations, potentially RICO prosecution for systematic discrimination using interstate commerce platforms. Elena could hear the jet engines in the background as Marcus's flight approached Seattle. The presentation is ready. Skyline Air executives are about to learn that discriminating against your children was the most expensive mistake in corporate aviation history. After ending the call, Elena looked around the Crisis Management Center, where her team continued documenting evidence of technological racism. They weren't just analyzing corporate misconduct. They were compiling proof that algorithmic discrimination had been deliberately constructed, financially incentivized, and systematically implemented while hidden behind the supposed objectivity of mathematical decision-making. The meeting in Seattle would determine whether Skyline Air chose comprehensive transformation or total destruction. But either way, the evidence was undeniable, overwhelming, and career-ending for everyone involved in building systems designed to perpetuate discrimination against children, whose only crime was flying while Black. The age of algorithmic racism disguised as operational efficiency was about to end, at least for companies stupid enough to target the family of someone who'd built the tools to expose them. Thomas Mackenzie's Gulfstream G650 was cutting through storm clouds over the Wyoming Rockies when his secure satellite phone rang with the number that made his chest tighten. 25 years of friendship had taught Tommy to recognize when Marcus Thompson was operating from a place of controlled fury rather than business calculation. Tommy, I need you to understand what your board just chose, Marcus said without preamble. William Sterling decided to treat this as a traditional corporate negotiation instead of what it actually is: systematic civil rights violations involving children. Tommy closed his laptop and gave his oldest friend complete attention. Through the Gulf Stream's windows, the Rocky Mountains stretched endlessly. Beautiful, immutable, indifferent to human crisis. Marcus tried to warn him. Sterling thinks this is about leverage and market positioning. He doesn't understand that you're fighting for your kid's dignity. Tommy, it's worse than Sterling's ignorance. Elena's team has been analyzing Skyline systems since this started. What happened to Zoe and Isaiah wasn't isolated discrimination. It was the predictable result of algorithmic bias your company built deliberately and maintained profitably. Tommy felt the familiar chill of watching corporate disaster unfold in real time. How deliberate programmer comments in source code that document intentional construction of discriminatory algorithms. Financial incentives that reward crew members for removing minority passengers. Manual override systems that allow regional managers to flag demographic-based upgrades for harassment. Tommy, they didn't just discriminate against my children. They built software specifically designed to discriminate while maintaining legal protection. The Gulf Stream hit turbulence that seemed metaphorical as Tommy processed implications that went far beyond individual misconduct into systematic institutional racism embedded in operational technology. Marcus, if what you're describing is accurate, the board has criminal exposure beyond just civil rights violations. Federal prosecutors are already requesting access to our evidence. This isn't going to be handled through corporate legal departments and settlement negotiations. This is going to federal court congressional hearings and industry-wide regulatory reform. Tommy's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Patricia Brennan's assistant, emergency board reconvening. Stock futures suspended. Thompson Tech contract termination effective immediately. Need your vote on survival strategy. The board is reconvening, Tommy told Marcus. Patricia's trying to coordinate response to your contract termination. Tell Patricia that survival requires accountability, not strategy. Your company can choose comprehensive transformation with federal oversight, or it can choose legal warfare while operating with 1990s technology and facing criminal prosecution. Those are the only options. Tommy understood his friend well enough to know that Marcus had already calculated multiple scenarios, each designed to force Skyline Air toward meaningful change rather than cosmetic reform. What's your timeline? I'm landing in Seattle in 40 minutes. Patricia has until I reach the airport to demonstrate genuine commitment to systematic reform. After that, the consequences become automatic and irreversible. What consequences specifically? Complete withdrawal of Thompson Tech support. Release of 3 years of discrimination evidence to federal prosecutors' coordination with civil rights organizations for systematic legal challenges and industry-wide advocacy for federal regulation of algorithmic bias in transportation. Tommy, I'm not just seeking justice for my children. I'm forcing accountability for technological racism across the entire airline industry. The threat was delivered without heat or anger, just mathematical certainty that made Tommy understand his friend had moved beyond personal grievance into systematic warfare against institutional discrimination. Marcus Sterling thinks he can weather this storm through traditional crisis management. He's talking about finding replacement technology vendors and fighting through legal channels. Tommy Sterling is delusional. Thompson Tech provides 70% of Skyline's operational infrastructure. Replacing our systems would take 18 months minimum, assuming any technology company would work with an airline that discriminated against children on viral video. Meanwhile, federal investigators will have complete access to evidence of systematic civil rights violations spanning 3 years. Tommy's Gulfstream began its descent toward Denver, where an emergency board meeting would determine Skyline Air's response to the crisis. The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. What's your message for Patricia and Sterling? Simple. Accountability or destruction. Comprehensive reform with federal oversight, or corporate extinction through operational paralysis and criminal prosecution. They chose confrontation when they should have chosen compassion. Now, they get to learn what confrontation costs when you target someone's children. After ending the call, Tommy stared at the approaching Denver skyline, understanding that the next few hours would determine whether his 25-year friendship survived the corporate reckoning about to unfold. More critically, they would determine whether Skyline Air emerged as an industry leader in civil rights reform or became a cautionary tale about what happened to companies that built systematic discrimination into their operational DNA. The plane touched down with unusual turbulence that felt ominous. Tommy's phone immediately exploded with messages from board members, executives, and crisis management consultants, all trying to coordinate response to what was rapidly becoming the most expensive discrimination incident in corporate aviation history. Patricia Brennan called before he'd even disembarked. "Tommy, thank God you're on the ground. Sterling is talking about declaring war on Marcus Thompson. He wants to fight this through courts and media while finding replacement technology vendors. I need you to talk sense into the board. Patricia fighting Marcus is corporate suicide. He's not some aggrieved customer looking for a settlement. He's someone who has the power to destroy us completely and the moral authority to justify doing it." What's his actual leverage beyond the technology contracts? Tommy walked across the Denver airport tarmac toward the Skyline Air corporate shuttle, watching ground crews service aircraft that might be grounded within days if Marcus followed through on his threats. Patricia Marcus has 3 years of evidence documenting systematic discrimination embedded in our operational software. He has programmer confessions written into source code. He has financial data showing we've profited from algorithmic bias. And he has viral footage of our employees discriminating against his children to give it all context. "Jesus," Patricia whispered. "Tommy, how do we survive this complete capitulation? Accept whatever reforms Marcus demands. Submit to federal oversight. Fire everyone involved in creating discriminatory policies. Publicly acknowledge systematic failures and commit to comprehensive change. And pray that transformation prevents criminal prosecution. Sterling will never agree to external oversight of company operations." Tommy reached the corporate shuttle, where other board members waited with expressions ranging from panic to defiance. Then, Sterling needs to understand that his choice is between oversight and extinction. Marcus isn't negotiating anymore, Patricia. He's implementing consequences. As the shuttle pulled away from the terminal, Tommy looked back at Skyline Air aircraft lined up like soldiers awaiting orders that might never come. In 40 minutes, Marcus Thompson would land in Seattle with evidence that could trigger the largest civil rights enforcement action in transportation history. The board meeting would determine whether Skyline Air chose survival through accountability or destruction through denial. But either way, the age of algorithmic discrimination disguised as operational efficiency was about to end with extreme prejudice. Marcus Thompson wasn't just seeking justice for his children anymore. He was forcing a reckoning that would reshape how technology companies, airlines, and corporate America addressed systematic bias embedded in the software systems that increasingly governed American life. The war had begun, but Marcus held all the weapons. In the cramped crew quarters of Flight 447, Rebecca Hartwell watched her life disintegrate through her iPhone screen. The edited video compilation was devastatingly precise. Every condescending word, every dismissive gesture, every moment where her professional facade cracked to reveal the prejudice underneath. 2 minutes and 37 seconds that would define the rest of her existence. The comments scrolled past like digital bullets. "Fire this racist immediately. How do you sleep at night? Terrorizing children." This is exactly why black families can't travel safely. And most devastating of all, from someone claiming to work at her daughter's school, Emma Thompson asked her teacher why her mommy was being mean to black kids on TV. The kid is heartbroken and confused. Rebecca's hands shook as she scrolled through the destruction. Her daughter Emma had somehow seen the footage. The 8-year-old had sent a voice message that played like a dagger to the heart. "Mommy, kids at school are saying you're racist." "Are you racist? Why won't you call me back?" Across the narrow crew space, Derek Mitchell was experiencing his own digital execution. His phone showed local Seattle news running a segment titled, "Veteran Flight Attendants Discrimination Caught on Camera." They'd interviewed neighbors, former military colleagues, even his children's teachers. Everyone expressing shock and disappointment that the Derek Mitchell they knew could treat children with such cruelty. Channel 7 interviewed our mailman. Derek said his voice hollow. Frank Patterson said he's surprised and saddened because he thought I was one of the good ones. 40 years of knowing me, and now he's talking about me to reporters like I'm a convicted criminal. Rebecca's ex-husband David called from Portland. She answered despite knowing the conversation would be torture. Rebecca, Emma's teacher, called. Other parents are demanding to know if she's related to the racist flight attendant from the viral video. Emma came home sobbing, asking if her mommy really hates black people. How do I explain to an 8-year-old that her mother became an internet symbol of discrimination? Rebecca closed her eyes, feeling generational damage, spreading beyond her own career into her daughter's understanding of right and wrong, fairness and cruelty. David, tell Emma that mommy made a terrible mistake. Tell her that treating people badly because of their skin color is wrong, and mommy forgot something very important when she should have remembered it most. Rebecca, that's not enough. Emma needs to understand that actions have consequences. She needs to know that what you did was morally wrong, not just a mistake. After ending the call, Rebecca sat in the crew quarters, understanding that her relationship with Emma would never recover. Her daughter would grow up knowing her mother as the woman who was mean to black children on television, who chose fear over fairness, who became a cautionary tale about ordinary people revealing extraordinary cruelty. In the main cabin, the dynamics had shifted completely. Economy class had transformed into a protective community around the Thompson children, while first class remained divided between passengers supporting the crew's actions and those horrified by witnessing systematic discrimination. Dr. Amanda Chen had moved from her first-class seat to sit near Zoe and Isaiah, using her pediatric expertise to monitor their stress levels while documenting the psychological impact of public humiliation. "You two are demonstrating remarkable resilience," she told them quietly. "But I want you to understand, what you've experienced isn't normal, isn't acceptable, and most importantly, isn't your fault." "We know," Zoe replied, still live streaming intermittently to her growing global audience. "Our daddy always told us this might happen. He said sometimes you have to fight for your dignity in front of strangers, so those strangers understand what dignity means." James Crawford had evolved from passive observer to active ally, coordinating with other passengers to ensure comprehensive documentation, while providing professional journalism context to his Seattle Tribune audience. "I've covered discrimination cases for 12 years, he told his livestream viewers, but I've never witnessed children handle institutional racism with this level of intelligence and composure. They're rewriting the textbook on civil rights advocacy in the digital age." Tyler Jackson was monitoring social media metrics that showed the story exploding beyond typical viral content into genuine cultural phenomenon. TikTok video hit 4 million views. Instagram posts are being shared by celebrities. Twitter trending algorithms show this reaching international audiences. People are treating this like a historical moment, not just airline drama. But the most significant change was happening in real time as passengers made individual choices about complicity versus allyship. Maria Santos, the middle school teacher, had organized fellow economy passengers into a support network. Robert Kim was coordinating with James Crawford to ensure legal quality documentation. Dr. Chen was providing medical assessment of trauma being inflicted on minors. When we land, Maria told the children, you're going to see crowds of people. Reporters, lawyers, supporters. Your father is coming, but more importantly, you have community. People who believe children deserve dignity, regardless of skin color. The aircraft captain's voice came over the intercom with professional calm that barely masked underlying tension. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Please return to your seats and prepare for landing. We expect some delays due to increased ground activity around the terminal. The euphemistic language couldn't hide what everyone could see through the windows. Media trucks creating a technological village around their gate, protesters holding signs supporting the Thompson children federal agents in dark suits, and what looked like half of Seattle's civil rights community organizing a welcoming committee. Eleanor Whitman sat in increasingly isolated silence in first class. The 70-year-old woman, whose racist commentary had been captured on multiple recordings, was discovering that words spoken in first-class comfort carried consequences in the real world. Her son Michael had called from his Seattle law firm, where partners were reviewing her family's involvement in firm social events. Her country club had temporarily suspended her membership, pending community discussion. Most devastating, her late husband's American Legion post had voted to remove her family's memorial plaque for statements incompatible with military values of equality and service. But Eleanor's most shocking realization came from watching herself on video. Seeing her own words played back without the internal justifications that had made them seem reasonable in the moment she was forced to confront 70 years of believing her comfort mattered more than other people's dignity. The recognition came too late to prevent damage, but not too late to understand its magnitude. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Hayes was dealing with his own moral reckoning. As one of the few black captains in commercial aviation, he'd experienced similar discrimination throughout his 30-year career. He'd been questioned about his qualifications, subjected to additional scrutiny, treated as suspicious until proven competent. The conflict between his professional obligation to support crew decisions and his personal understanding of discrimination was tearing him apart. His co-pilot, First Officer Jennifer Mason, spoke quietly. Captain Air Traffic Control is asking about the media situation. They want to know if we need special security protocols for deplaning. Captain Hayes looked out at the crowd gathering below. Thousands of people who'd driven to the airport, not to travel, but to witness two children who'd refused to accept discrimination as normal. Jennifer, in 30 years of flying, I've never seen anything like this. These kids are going to change the industry, whether they meant to or not. Back in the crew quarters, Derek was reading messages from former Air Force colleagues expressing disappointment and confusion about his actions. Men he'd served with in Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Iraq, men who'd trusted him with their lives, were now publicly questioning his character and values. Sarah's been put on administrative leave at the hospital, Derek said, reading a text from his wife. Hospital administration says they can't have nursing staff associated with discrimination against children while they're treating pediatric patients. 20 years of her career destroyed because of my choices. Rebecca looked up from her own messages, where former colleagues were sharing their shock and disappointment that someone they'd worked with could treat children with such cruelty. Derek, we didn't just hurt those kids. We hurt our families, our communities, everyone who trusted us to do better. The aircraft touched down with a gentle bump that felt like thunder. Through the crew quarters window, Rebecca could see protesters holding signs. Children deserve dignity. Flying while black isn't a crime. Zoe and Isaiah, our heroes. Counter-protesters held different signs. Support our crews. One side of the story, but they were vastly outnumbered. Derek's radio crackled with final instructions from the captain. All crew members remain seated until federal agents board for interviews. Legal representation is standing by at the gate. Rebecca understood that walking off this aircraft would be like walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided by millions of people who'd witnessed her choices in high-definition video. She'd become a symbol of institutional racism, her face forever associated with the casual cruelty of discriminating against children for the crime of existing while black. As the jet bridge connected with a mechanical thud that sounded like a judge's gavel, Rebecca Hartwell and Derek Mitchell prepared to face consequences that would define the rest of their lives. They'd made choices that revealed who they really were under pressure, and those choices were now part of American civil rights history. Meanwhile, Zoe and Isaiah Thompson prepared to disembark into a world they'd changed through courage documentation and refusal to accept that dignity was something they had to earn rather than something they deserved. The reckoning had arrived, and it was bigger than anyone had imagined. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport had transformed into the epicenter of a national civil rights moment. Gate C7 was surrounded by a technological forest of media equipment, satellite trucks with dishes pointed skyward, camera crews with professional lighting rigs, and reporters with microphones creating a gauntlet that stretched from the jet bridge to the terminal's main concourse. Elena Vasquez commanded the VIP lounge overlooking the gate, like a general directing the most important battle of her career. Wall-mounted monitors displayed real-time metrics that told the story of corporate accountability spreading across the globe. 127 million social media impressions. Congressional offices demanding federal investigations. Stock markets pricing in the collapse of systematic discrimination as a profitable business model. International coverage now reported Sarah Kim Elena's media coordinator scrolling through feeds from BBC, Deutsche Welle, Al Jazeera, and NHK. The European Union is using this as a case study for their upcoming AI bias regulations. This isn't just American news. It's becoming global policy discussion. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Elena watched the crowd below organizing into something that looked more like a movement than a protest. Parents held homemade signs reading, "Our children's dignity is non-negotiable, and technology should serve justice." University students had created a flash mob, spelling out accountability in human letters. The NAACP had established information tables, but so had computer science professors, explaining algorithmic bias to anyone who would listen. Dr. Amanda Chen emerged from the jet bridge, looking like a soldier returning from combat, emotionally drained, but grimly determined. She'd spent the final hour of the flight documenting her medical observations, preparing to testify about the psychological warfare conducted against children through systematic humiliation. "How are they holding up?" Elena asked as Dr. Chen approached. "Better than any adults would." Amanda replied, her pediatric training evident in her clinical assessment. "But they're running on adrenaline and righteous anger now. The real emotional processing will hit when the immediate crisis passes. They'll need protection from exploitation and probably therapeutic support to work through the trauma of being treated like criminals on viral video." James Crawford was providing continuous coverage to his Seattle Tribune audience, but his role had evolved from journalist to historical documentarian. "I've covered corporate scandals, discrimination lawsuits, federal investigations," he told his live stream viewers. "But I've never seen systematic institutional racism exposed with this level of precision and public accountability. These children aren't just seeking justice. They're creating it in real time." Inside the aircraft, Zoe and Isaiah sat in their economy seats, surrounded by passengers who'd become protective allies. The cabin felt different now, not just because of the media attention waiting outside, but because moral lines had been drawn and sides chosen through individual acts of courage and cowardice witnessed by millions. Tyler Jackson looked up from his phone, where his TikTok videos were approaching 5 million views. "You guys realize this is going to be in history textbooks, right?" my American history professor just texted. She's already planning a unit on digital age civil rights, using your story as the primary case study. The comment carried weight that none of them had fully processed. This wasn't just viral content that would fade from public attention after a news cycle. This was documentation of contemporary discrimination that would be studied, analyzed, and referenced for generations. Derek Mitchell and Rebecca Hartwell remained in crew quarters, waiting for federal agents and dreading the moment they'd face consequences for choices that had seemed routine 3 hours earlier, but now appeared as deliberate acts of cruelty captured in unforgiving high definition. 22 years of military service, 20 years in aviation, Derek said, staring at his termination email. Everything I built, everything I earned, everything I was proud of, gone because I treated 2 kids like they were lying about seats their father bought them. Rebecca looked up from her own employment destruction, her face pale with shock and recognition. Derek, those kids are going to tell their children about today. They're going to tell them about the day airline crew members treated them like criminals for sitting in first class while black. We're going to be the villains in stories passed down through generations. The aircraft door opened with mechanical finality, and Marcus Thompson appeared at the jet bridge entrance. His presence alone seemed to change the atmospheric pressure throughout the terminal. Conversations quieted, cameras swiveled toward him. Security guards formed protective corridors through the media chaos. Elena met him with crisis management efficiency, global media coverage, federal investigation, launched congressional hearings scheduled stock down, 58%. Skyline executives waiting with full legal teams, children stable, but exhausted. Marcus absorbed the information, while his attention remained focused on the aircraft where his children were preparing to emerge into a world fundamentally altered by their courage. Status with Skyline's board. Complete panic. Elena replied with satisfaction that was both professional and personal. Sterling tried to play hardball, so you terminated their technology contracts. Their operational systems are failing in real time. They're facing corporate extinction within 48 hours unless they capitulate completely to whatever demands you make. Marcus walked toward the aircraft, and crowd noise intensified as supporters recognized him. Camera flashes created strobe effects visible even under bright terminal lighting, but security maintained clear paths through the organized chaos. Mr. Thompson shouted at a CNN correspondent, "What's your response to systematic discrimination against your children?" Marcus paused at the jet bridge entrance, his expression calm, but carrying energy that made everyone understand significant changes were about to unfold. My response will be comprehensive, documented, and designed to ensure no family ever experiences the institutional racism mine experienced today. Inside the aircraft, Zoe and Isaiah looked up as their father appeared, and the reunion was both intensely emotional and deliberately private despite surrounding cameras. Marcus knelt to embrace his children, speaking quietly in words meant for them alone, while the world watched a father reassuring kids who'd been forced to grow up during a single commercial flight. Daddy, Zoe said, her voice finally showing cracks in the composure she'd maintained for hours. We did everything you taught us. We documented everything. We didn't let them make us feel like we didn't belong. I know, baby girl, Marcus, replied his voice carrying pride and barely controlled fury. You and Isaiah showed the world what courage looks like when children refuse to accept being treated as less than they are. Isaiah looked up at his father with 11-year-old directness. Are we going to be okay? Marcus considered his answer carefully, aware that dozens of passengers were listening, and millions more would hear his words through live streams and news coverage. We're going to be better than okay. We're going to make sure no other children have to be as brave as you were today. The passengers around them erupted in spontaneous applause. Not performative clapping for cameras, but genuine recognition of a family's dignity maintained under pressure that would have broken most adults. Dr. Chen approached with medical documentation and offers of continued support. Tyler Jackson presented his complete video archive as evidence. Maria Santos delivered a letter signed by 37 passengers requesting systematic airline industry reforms and federal oversight of discriminatory practices. As they prepared to leave the aircraft, Marcus noticed Derek Mitchell and Rebecca Hartwell waiting near crew quarters. Both looked devastated, understanding their careers were over and their reputations permanently destroyed by choices they'd probably made hundreds of times before. Except this time, the cameras were rolling and the consequences were unavoidable. For a moment, Marcus considered approaching them, perhaps acknowledging their humanity, despite their actions offering some path toward redemption through accountability. But then he looked at his children, saw the exhaustion behind their remarkable strength, and realized that forgiveness was a luxury that required genuine remorse before it could be meaningful. The Thompson family walked up the jet bridge toward crowds of supporters, reporters, and corporate executives who were about to discover that accountability had arrived at Gate C7 in the form of two children who'd refused to accept discrimination as the normal cost of flying while black. Through the terminal windows, they could see Skyline Air's corporate jet touching down at a distant runway, carrying Patricia Brennan and her executive team to what would either be the most important negotiation of their careers or the final meeting before corporate extinction. The real confrontation was about to begin, but Marcus Thompson held all the leverage and intended to use every bit of it. The executive conference room at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport felt like a tribunal where the verdict had been predetermined by viral video evidence and global outrage. Patricia Brennan sat across from Marcus Thompson at a table that reflected the fluorescent lights like a mirror, creating the illusion that two versions of this confrontation were happening simultaneously, one for the cameras, one for history. The wall-mounted displays told the story of corporate accountability. Arriving with mathematical precision, stock price collapsed. 59% federal investigators demanding immediate access to company records. Congressional representatives scheduling hearings on systematic discrimination in transportation and international coverage, treating this as a watershed moment in civil rights enforcement. Marcus sat with the controlled stillness of someone who held complete leverage and had calculated exactly how to use it. Elena flanked him with her tablet of algorithmic evidence. Two Thompson tech attorneys documented every word, and a federal court stenographer made clear that this conversation would become part of permanent legal record. But Marcus had brought one more person, Dr. Amanda Chen, whose medical expertise would provide clinical context for the psychological warfare conducted against his children. Patricia, Marcus said with Arctic politeness, "Thank you for flying to Seattle to discuss your company's systematic discrimination against children." Patricia straightened in her chair, recognizing that traditional corporate damage control language would be not just inadequate, but insulting, given the evidence surrounding this meeting. Beside her sat General Counsel David Park, COO, Vincent Rodriguez, CFO, Michael Chen, and Thomas McKenzie, 5 executives who collectively earned more than most countries' GDP, now reduced to defendants awaiting judgment. Marcus Fry want to express our profound regret for what Zoe and Isaiah experienced. Patricia began carefully. This incident represents a complete failure of our values and training. Patricia Marcus interrupted with surgical precision. I'm not here for expressions of regret. I'm here for binding commitments to systematic change. Your company's values are demonstrated through your actions, and your actions today revealed 3 years of algorithmic discrimination designed to appear objective while perpetuating racial bias. Elena activated her tablet, filling the room's displays with evidence that made every attorney present understand their client's hopeless legal position. Discriminatory code with programmer confessions embedded in comments. Financial incentives rewarding crew members for removing minority passengers. email trails documenting regional managers' racist policies, and most damaging, proof that Thomson Tech's bias detection software could have prevented everything if properly implemented. This evidence documents systematic civil rights violations affecting thousands of passengers over 3 years. Dr. Chen announced her medical training evident in clinical precision. As a pediatric specialist, I can testify that the psychological trauma inflicted on the Thomson children constitutes deliberate abuse designed to enforce racial hierarchy through public humiliation. David Park stared at the evidence with horror of someone watching career destruction unfold in real time. Marcus, if we could discuss settlement parameters. No settlements. Marcus replied with finality that made everyone understand traditional negotiation was impossible. Your company forfeited the right to private resolution when your employees publicly humiliated children on viral video. This conversation is being recorded for federal prosecutors, congressional investigators, and civil rights organizations who will monitor compliance with whatever agreements we reach. The room absorbed this in uncomfortable silence. Patricia looked around the table at her executive team, seeing recognition that survival required complete capitulation rather than strategic negotiation. What specifically do you require? Patricia asked, understanding that acceptance was the only option. Marcus consulted his notes with methodical precision that suggested these demands had been carefully crafted for maximum institutional impact. 6 non-negotiable requirements, with federal oversight and criminal penalties for non-compliance. The number had grown, and everyone in the room understood why. William Sterling's confrontational approach had transformed this from crisis management into systematic warfare against institutional discrimination. First, immediate termination with cause of Derek Mitchell, Rebecca Hartwell, Jennifer Walsh, and any other employee involved in creating or implementing discriminatory policies. Termination documentation must specify discriminatory conduct preventing future employment in customer service throughout the transportation industry. Vincent Rodriguez started to mention union contracts and due process, but Thomas McKenzie cut him off sharply. The board had already accepted that individual accountability was unavoidable. Second, complete implementation of Thomson Tech's bias detection software with real-time monitoring of every passenger interaction. Any attempt to circumvent or manipulate the software triggers immediate federal investigation and criminal referral. Elena displayed technical specifications showing how comprehensive implementation would create unprecedented transparency in airline operations, making discrimination impossible to hide behind corporate policies or individual crew member decisions. Third, federal monitoring of all operations through independent civil rights oversight board with authority to investigate complaints, impose corrective measures, and recommend criminal prosecution. Board composition includes NOACP, Legal Defense Fund Transportation, Equity Network, and passenger advocacy organizations. Patricia felt traditional corporate authority structures dissolving as external oversight would essentially place federal monitors inside every operational decision affecting passenger treatment. Fourth, establishment of a $100 million educational equity fund administered by independent trustees focused on STEM opportunities for underrepresented youth in aviation and technology. This represents restitution for students deterred from aviation careers by witnessing or experiencing discrimination. The number was staggering, $100 million, representing not just financial penalty, but acknowledgement that discrimination created generational harm, requiring generational repair. Fifth, complete transparency in passenger treatment data with quarterly public reporting of demographic disparities, discrimination complaints, and remedial actions. Any attempt to manipulate or suppress data results in immediate contract termination and federal prosecution. Michael Chen, the CFO, was calculating the financial implications, while understanding that refusing meant corporate extinction within days, as operational systems failed completely. And sixth, Marcus continued, his voice hardening, with personal investment. Executive accountability through personal financial penalties tied to discrimination incidents. CEO, COO, CFO, and board members forfeit salary bonuses and stock options for any verified discrimination under their oversight. Leadership that fails to prevent institutional racism pays personal consequences through wealth forfeiture. The demand was unprecedented, making corporate executives personally liable for discriminatory actions by any employee anywhere in the system at any time. Marcus. Patricia said carefully. These requirements would fundamentally alter how airlines operate industry-wide. Exactly, Marcus replied without hesitation. Your industry has used technology to perpetuate systematic racism while hiding behind algorithmic objectivity. Either airlines embrace comprehensive civil rights compliance, or they face federal regulation that makes my demands seem generous. Elena activated displays showing congressional response escalating beyond individual company accountability into industry-wide reform. Senator Elizabeth Warren was drafting legislation requiring bias detection systems throughout transportation. The Department of Justice was launching comprehensive investigation of algorithmic discrimination across multiple industries. The political momentum for federal regulation is irreversible, Dr. Chen added. You can choose to lead industry transformation voluntarily, or you can wait for congressional mandates that will be far more restrictive and criminally enforceable. David Park was frantically reviewing legal precedents on his tablet. If we agree to executive liability provisions, board members could face personal financial destruction for discrimination they had no direct knowledge of. Then board members have powerful incentives to ensure discrimination doesn't happen, Marcus replied coldly. Your fiduciary duty includes preventing civil rights violations that could bankrupt shareholders and destroy employee livelihoods. Thomas Mackenzie understood his friend was offering survival through accountability rather than destruction through denial. Marcus, what timeline are we discussing for implementation? 60 days for software deployment, 30 days for oversight board establishment, immediate termination of discriminatory employees, and first public transparency report in 90 days. Federal monitors verify compliance weekly with criminal referral authority for any violations. The room fell silent, except for air conditioning hums and the quiet scratching of legal pads as attorneys calculated the magnitude of corporate transformation being demanded. If we refuse, Patricia asked, though everyone knew the answer. Thompson Tech support terminates immediately. Your operational systems collapse within 24 hours. Federal prosecutors receive complete evidence packages documenting 3 years of systematic discrimination. Congressional hearings begin within 2 weeks. And every technology company in America understands that doing business with airlines means complying with comprehensive civil rights standards. Elena smiled with professional satisfaction. Also, we've coordinated with civil rights organizations, technology companies, and federal agencies to establish industry-wide standards based on whatever agreement we reach here. This becomes the template for algorithmic accountability across all transportation sectors. Patricia Brennan looked around the table at her executive team, understanding they were witnessing the birth of a new era in corporate civil rights accountability. The choice was between leading that transformation or being destroyed by resistance to inevitable change. We accept, she said quietly, her voice barely audible, but carrying absolute finality. All 6 requirements. Federal oversight, personal executive liability, complete transparency, independent monitoring. We accept everything. Marcus nodded once, his expression unchanged by victory that had been mathematically inevitable once the evidence was compiled and leverage was calculated. Elena will coordinate implementation with your legal team. First compliance report due in 30 days. Any violation triggers immediate federal investigation and contract termination. He stood to leave, then paused for words that would be quoted in congressional testimony and civil rights textbooks. Patricia, I want you to understand something. This isn't victory for my family. This is basic human decency that should have been standard practice for decades. My children shouldn't have needed courage to sit in seats I purchased for them. After the Thompson team left the Skyline, Air executives sat in stunned silence, understanding they had just agreed to the most comprehensive corporate civil rights transformation in American business history. The age of systematic discrimination, disguised as operational efficiency, had ended with a father's love for his children, and a refusal to accept that dignity was conditional on race. Derek Mitchell sat in the sterile holding area of SeaTac's Federal Security Office, his military bearing finally broken after decades of rigid self-discipline. The termination papers felt heavier than body armor, representing not just employment loss, but complete destruction of everything he'd believed about duty, honor, and following orders. Across from him, FBI Civil Rights Division agent Sarah Martinez reviewed video evidence on her tablet, the same footage that had destroyed his reputation globally, but now being analyzed for federal prosecution potential. Derek understood he wasn't just fired. He was potentially facing criminal charges for conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of authority. Mr. Mitchell, you served 20 years in the Air Force before aviation agent Martinez said, her voice carrying professional neutrality that somehow felt more damning than anger. Help me understand how someone who swore to defend the Constitution decided to violate civil rights of American children. Derek stared at hands that had once saluted the flag, had once been trusted with national security, had once represented American values overseas. Agent Martinez. I followed orders. 20 years. Military. 20 years aviation. I followed the chain of command. When supervisors said, maintain standards, I maintained standards, whose standards required removing children from seats their father purchased. The question hung in the air like smoke from a destroyed career. Derek had no answer that didn't sound like exactly what it was. Systematic discrimination disguised as operational procedure. I made a mistake. He said finally, the words inadequate, even to himself. Mr. Mitchell, federal law doesn't recognize mistakes when civil rights violations are systematic and documented. What you did was deliberate, recorded, and witnessed by millions. The question is whether you were acting independently or following institutional policies. Derek understood the implications. Cooperating with federal investigation might reduce his personal liability while exposing Skyline Air to broader criminal prosecution. Refusing to cooperate meant facing maximum penalties while protecting a company that had already terminated him and destroyed his pension. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Sarah. Hospital terminated me. 20 years nursing gone because I'm married to someone who discriminated against children. Kids can't go back to school. Reporters won't leave us alone. When you get home, we need to talk about separation. 24 hours ago, Derek Mitchell had been a respected aviation professional with a stable marriage, financial security, and community standing. Now he was unemployable, facing federal charges, and watching his family disintegrate because of choices that had seemed routine until cameras captured them. Meanwhile, Rebecca Hartwell faced her own federal interview 3 doors down. Agent James Chen was reviewing employment records that showed a pattern of following discriminatory guidance from regional management. Ms. Hartwell, emails show you received specific training from Jennifer Walsh about maintaining cabin atmosphere in premium sections. Can you explain what that phrase meant in practice? Rebecca's hands trembled as she processed the implications of her cooperation. It meant keeping first-class passengers comfortable. and some passengers complained when they saw minorities in premium seats. Jennifer said we should trust their feedback about appropriate demographics. So you were trained to remove minority passengers based on other passengers' racial preferences? Not explicitly, Rebecca said, recognizing how pathetic the distinction sounded. But implicitly, yes. We were supposed to minimize complaints from premium customers, and premium customers complained about diversity. Agent Chen made notes that Rebecca understood would become evidence in federal prosecution of systematic discrimination. Her cooperation might reduce personal liability, but it was simultaneously destroying any possibility of employment in customer service, while exposing her daughter Emma to ongoing scrutiny as the child of someone who'd enforced institutional racism. Jennifer Walsh faced the most serious federal investigation in a separate facility. As regional manager, she'd created the policies that enabled discrimination while maintaining legal deniability. FBI agents were reviewing 3 years of emails, training materials, and performance evaluations that documented systematic implementation of discriminatory practices. Ms. Walsh, programmer, comments, in Skyline's booking software reference coordination with operational guidance regarding demographic screening. Did you provide that guidance? Jennifer understood she was facing potential RICO prosecution for conspiracy to violate civil rights using interstate commerce systems. Her choice was between accepting responsibility for systematic discrimination or claiming ignorance, while federal prosecutors built cases around evidence she'd created herself. I provided efficiency guidelines, she said carefully. Passenger satisfaction metrics, incident prevention protocols, revenue optimization strategies. Ms. Walsh. Revenue optimization based on excluding minorities from premium services is called discrimination. Incident prevention that targets children for removal is called racial profiling. We have documentation that you trained employees to discriminate while providing legal cover through euphemistic language. Jennifer had built her career translating racist customer complaints into corporate policies that appeared neutral while perpetuating bias. Now, federal agents were dissecting that translation process as evidence of criminal conspiracy. But perhaps the most profound reckoning belonged to Eleanor Whitman. At 72, she'd become the face of privileged racism, her casual cruelty broadcast globally and dissected as representative of systematic prejudice disguised as social propriety. Her son Michael had requested she not contact his family until community sentiment improved. Her grandchildren were being bullied at school as racist grandma's family. Her social circles had evaporated as former friends distanced themselves from association with viral bigotry. Eleanor sat in her Queen Anne home watching news coverage that played her racist comments repeatedly while commentators analyzed the psychology of discrimination among educated, affluent Americans. For the first time in 7 decades, she was forced to confront how her comfort had been purchased through other people's discomfort, how her sense of belonging had required other people's exclusion. The realization came too late to prevent the damage she'd caused, but not too late to understand its magnitude. She'd spent her life believing that social hierarchy was natural, that some people deserved premium treatment, while others deserved suspicion. 2 children had shattered those beliefs simply by refusing to accept her assessment of their worth. In separate locations across Seattle, 4 people faced permanent consequences of choices made during routine air travel. Each had contributed to systematic discrimination that treated children as problems rather than passengers. Each now understood that institutional racism wasn't abstract policy. It was individual choices that accumulated into patterns of exclusion and humiliation. Derek Mitchell would plead guilty to civil rights violations in exchange for cooperation with federal prosecution of Skyline Air's systematic discrimination. His military honors would be reviewed for revocation. His pension would be eliminated. His family would relocate to escape community judgment. Rebecca Hartwell would never work in customer service again. Her relationship with daughter Emma would require years of counseling to rebuild trust. Her cooperation with federal investigation would prevent criminal prosecution, but ensure permanent employment disability in any role requiring interaction with diverse populations. Jennifer Walsh would face criminal conspiracy charges and civil rights violations, carrying potential federal prison time. Her systematic policies had created the framework enabling discrimination against thousands of passengers. Individual cooperation couldn't absolve institutional responsibility she deliberately constructed. Eleanor Whitman would spend her remaining years understanding that privilege built on exclusion was ultimately hollow. Her casual racism had been exposed as deliberate cruelty disguised as social standards. Community rejection would force introspection that came decades too late for meaningful redemption. The Thompson children had forced all of them to confront a truth that would define the remainder of their lives. Dignity isn't earned through compliance or good behavior. Every human being deserves respect simply by existing. When systems and people fail to recognize that truth, consequences ensure the failure doesn't happen again. 2 years after Flight 447, the airline industry bore little resemblance to the sector that had systematically discriminated against the Thompson children. The Marcus Thompson Civil Rights Compliance Standards, federal law since congressional passage 8 months earlier, required every commercial carrier to implement bias detection technology, submit to independent oversight, and report discrimination metrics with the same precision used for safety data. Patricia Brennan stood in Skyline Air's completely reconstructed headquarters, where the Office of Passenger Equity occupied the executive floor's prime real estate. Digital displays showed real-time monitoring of every passenger interaction across the airline's global operations, a level of transparency that had initially terrified executives but ultimately revolutionized customer service standards. Annual compliance report shows 87% reduction in discrimination complaints, announced Dr. Michael Washington, the former NAACP Legal Defense Fund attorney who'd become Skyline's chief equity officer. Customer satisfaction scores are at historic highs across all demographic categories. Most significantly, minority passengers now recommend our airline at rates exceeding white passengers for the first time in company history. The transformation had cost Skyline Air over $300 million in system overhauls, staff retraining, and compliance infrastructure. Executive bonuses had been eliminated for 3 years to fund changes. Several board members had resigned rather than accept federal oversight of their decisions. But the results justified every dollar spent. Skyline was now the industry leader in equitable treatment, attracting customers who chose airlines based on civil rights commitments. Corporate clients had returned with premium contracts. Stock prices had recovered and exceeded pre-incident levels. Employee satisfaction reached record heights because staff no longer faced pressure to discriminate against passengers. Elena Vasquez walked through Thompson Tech's expanded campus in Seattle, where the company had become the global standard for algorithmic bias detection. The software that could have prevented the Thompson children's discrimination was now mandatory across transportation, healthcare, education, and financial services through federal regulation rather than voluntary adoption. Implementation requests from 87 countries, reported Alex Chen, now Vice President of Global Bias Prevention Systems. The European Union requires our software for all AI systems affecting human services. The UN Human Rights Council has adopted our protocols as international standards. 2 kids refusing to give up their airline seats became the foundation for global algorithmic accountability. The ripple effects had transformed multiple industries. Healthcare systems used Thompson Tech's bias detection to ensure equitable treatment recommendations. Educational software included mandatory fairness protocols. Employment platforms were required to demonstrate non-discriminatory candidate selection. Housing, lending, and insurance industries faced federal oversight for algorithmic bias. At Seattle Children's Hospital, Dr. Amanda Chen had completed groundbreaking research on discrimination trauma in young people work that had informed new therapeutic protocols and federal guidelines for treating bias-related psychological injury. The Thompson children's resilience was remarkable, but their experience revealed systematic psychological warfare conducted against minority children through institutional discrimination. She explained to congressional investigators developing youth civil rights legislation, "We now understand that bias-based humiliation constitutes deliberate trauma, requiring medical and legal intervention." Her testimony had influenced federal law recognizing discrimination-related psychological injury as grounds for both criminal prosecution and civil remedy. Children who experienced institutional bias now had legal standing to seek therapeutic support and financial compensation through federal victim services. James Crawford had leveraged his Pulitzer Prize-winning coverage into comprehensive investigation of systematic bias across American institutions. His book, Two Seats Justice: How Children Transformed Civil Rights in the Digital Age, had become required reading in law schools, journalism programs, and civil rights courses worldwide. The Thompson children's courage in documenting their own humiliation created unprecedented opportunity for institutional accountability. James wrote in his acclaimed follow-up investigation, "Sometimes the most important social change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as normal, even when challenging that injustice requires extraordinary personal courage." But the most significant transformation occurred in classrooms across America, where the Thompson incident had become foundational curriculum in civics, computer science, and social justice education. Students analyzed the booking algorithm code, studied discriminatory performance metrics, and learned the difference between legal compliance and moral leadership. At Roosevelt High School in Seattle, social studies teacher Maria Santos used the case to connect historical civil rights struggles with contemporary algorithmic bias challenges. Zoe and Isaiah Thompson were teenagers when they decided their dignity wasn't negotiable. She told her students during a unit on modern civil rights advocacy. They faced systematic discrimination, designed to make them feel like they didn't belong in spaces they'd earned access to. Their refusal to accept that treatment forced institutional changes that protect every student in this classroom. The Thompson family had largely returned to private life, though privacy was relative when your children had become international symbols of youth activism and algorithmic accountability. Zoe had graduated high school early and was completing dual degrees in computer science and public policy at MIT. Isaiah had been accepted into NASA's Accelerated Aerospace Engineering program, where his research on sustainable flight systems was being incorporated into next-generation aircraft design. Marcus Thompson had used the Skyline Air settlement and subsequent consulting success to establish the Thompson Institute for Algorithmic Justice, creating oversight systems now preventing discrimination in hiring, housing, healthcare, and education across 43 states. His work had made him one of Time magazine's most influential people and a frequent advisor to federal agencies developing civil rights technology standards. "My children taught me that dignity isn't something you fight for. It's something you possess, that systems must recognize," Marcus told the United Nations Human Rights Council during testimony about algorithmic bias in global commerce. "Every technology we deploy, every system we create, every interaction we facilitate must honor the fundamental truth that all humans deserve equitable treatment regardless of race, ethnicity, or any other characteristic beyond their control." On a quiet evening in December, exactly 3 years after Flight 447, the Thompson family sat together in their Seattle home, reviewing college applications for Isaiah and graduate school options for Zoe. The media attention had faded, the speaking engagements had decreased, but the institutional changes they'd catalyzed continued expanding through American society. "Do you ever regret standing up that day?" Marcus asked his children, now 16 and 14, both taller and more confident, but still recognizably the kids who'd refused to be moved from where they belonged. Zoe and Isaiah exchanged glances, sharing wordless communication developed through shared trauma, transformed into triumph. "No," Zoe replied, her voice carrying the same strength that had live-streamed discrimination to the world. "We belonged in those seats. Every kid deserves to know they belong wherever they've earned the right to be. And every adult needs to make sure that's true." Through the kitchen window, they could see a Skyline Air aircraft climbing into the Seattle sky, carrying passengers who would never know how much safer, more dignified, and more equitable their travel had become, because two children had refused to accept discrimination as the normal price of existing while Black in America. The transformation was permanent. The legacy would last forever. Thank you for watching this powerful story of courage, dignity, and justice. If this video opened your eyes to the reality of discrimination that still exists today, please hit that like button to help us reach more people with this important message. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things to make the world more fair and just. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these crucial stories that need to be told. And please share this video with your family, friends, and community. These stories of standing up for what's right, especially when it's difficult, need to reach as many people as possible. Together, we can build a world where every child knows they belong wherever they've earned the right to be. Drop a comment below and tell us about a time when you or someone you know stood up against injustice. Your stories matter, your voice matters, and your courage to speak up can inspire others to do the same. Remember, change happens when ordinary people refuse to accept that discrimination is normal. Like Zoe and Isaiah Thompson, we all have the power to document injustice, demand accountability, and create a better world for the next generation.